Q Review Print Speaking to the Blind, celebrating 40 years of audio newspaper production. Welcome to this week's edition of the Herald Scotland podcast, recorded at the Bishop Briggs Media Centre by our amazing volunteers. You can get in touch with us via Facebook, Twitter or Instagram using @CuneReview, that is @CuandReview. You can also contact us directly by emailing information@cunereview.com. That is INFORMATION @CuandReview.com, or by calling 0141 772 3976. That's 0141 772 3976.
This is from the Herald Scotland of Wednesday the 14th of January 2025 from the business section. Contract secured for world's largest offshore wind farm in the North Sea. This article is by Craig Williams. A contract has been secured for what could become the world's largest offshore wind farm in the North Sea. Perth-headquartered energy giant SSE has secured a 20-year contract for 1.4 gigawatts of low-carbon offshore wind power from Phase B of its Berwick Bank wind farm project in the UK's 7th Contracts for Difference CFD allocation round, announced on Wednesday. The contract for Berwick Bank B marks the only successful Contract for Difference award to a Scottish fixed-bottom offshore wind project in the auction round, and comes after the full project's offshore wind farm array was granted a consent order by the Scottish Government in July 2025. The latest round of contracts comprises 6 new projects located off the coast in different areas of the country, and also includes Dogger Bank South off the coast of Yorkshire and Norfolk Vanguard off the East Anglian coast. The auction round is also supporting UK efforts to develop floating offshore wind technologies, which see turbines mounted on floating platforms rather than fixed foundations. The new contracts include 2 such projects, Erebus off the Pembrokeshire coast in the Celtic Sea and Pentland off the coast of Dounreay in Scotland, which are backed by investment from Great British Energy and the National Wealth Fund. SSE said it will now progress Berwick Bank B towards a final investment decision in line with our hurdle rates and investment criteria, expected in 2027. Located in the North Sea, in the outer Firth of Forth, around 38 kilometres east of the Scottish Borders coastline, the Berwick Bank wind farm has the potential to deliver up to 4.1 gigawatts of installed capacity, making it one of the largest offshore opportunities in the world. The 4.1 gigawatt of capacity is believed to be enough to power every home in Scotland twice over, and around 17% of the homes in the UK. The development will feature up to 307 turbines and have 2 connection points to the UK electricity grid, one in Dunbar, East Lothian, and another in Blyth, Northumberland. SSE estimates that its Berwick Bank wind farm project could inject around £8 billion into the UK economy and support over 9,000 UK jobs, 4,650 of which would be located in Scotland. Energy Minister Michael Shanks said, "This is a monumental result that sees the first Scottish offshore wind project in 3 years securing support from our flagship renewables auction, putting us firmly on track to meet our clean power mission and supporting thousands of jobs in the region. It also shows the kind of energy system we want to build for Scotland, by agreeing a price for offshore wind that is far lower than the cost of building new gas, clean power is the right choice to get bills down for good. Martin Pibworth, Chief Executive of SSE plc, said, "We are delighted. Berwick Bank B has been successful in AR7 and has secured a contract for difference for 1.4 gigawatts of essential new low-carbon power for the UK at a competitive price for consumers. This milestone enables us to advance the project towards a final investment decision and reinforces our commitment at SSE to delivering sustainable growth and long-term value for society, for consumers and for our shareholders. If built to its full projected capacity of more than 4 gigawatts, Berwick Bank Wind Farm can rank among the largest offshore wind projects globally. It would represent the single most significant contribution towards achieving the Scottish and UK government's offshore wind targets and can accelerate the delivery of homegrown, affordable and secure clean energy to UK consumers from excellent Scottish offshore wind resources." Speaking in July 2025, after the full project's offshore wind farm array was granted a consent order by the Scottish Government, Deputy First Minister Kate Forbes said, "The decision to grant consent to Berwick Bank is a major step in Scotland's progress towards achieving net zero and tackling the climate crisis, as well as supporting national energy security and growing our green economy. It is also an important decision for Scotland's renewable sector, and this investment will be further built upon through the delivery of Scotland's significant future pipeline of offshore wind projects under the ScotWind and the Innovation and Targeted Oil and Gas Leasing Rounds. We will continue to work closely with the developer and key stakeholders, including those working in fishing and conservation, to minimize the impact of the development on the marine environment and other marine users, and balance the needs of people and nature." That article was by Craig Williams. This is from the Herald Scotland of Wednesday, the 14th of January 2025, from the Opinion section. It used to be called Voices. It's now Opinion. US policing is bloodied enough. We don't need Trump fanning the flames. This article is by Callum Steele. Policing in the United States is fraught with danger and very different to other Western nations. But Donald Trump's unfettered support for ICE, is an invitation to lawlessness under the badge, argues columnist Callum Steele. Woodbridge, Virginia, is not a place name that carries the same notoriety as Ferguson, Missouri, nor is Ashley Marie Gwynton a name that instantly resonates in the way those of George Floyd or Michael Brown do. Her death did not trigger mass protests or weeks of rioting on American streets. Yet, like Floyd and Brown, Gwynton's killing offers a stark insight into the dangers faced on both sides of police encounters in the United States, and is why stories like hers, even when they pass largely unnoticed, still matter. Ashley Gwynton was murdered on her very first call on her first day as a police officer. Having twice served in Iraq, she was not unfamiliar with danger, but stood no chance as she was shot and killed as she got out of her police car to attend a domestic violence call, where it turned out her attacker had already murdered his wife. Ashley was 28 when she was killed. Her name, along with those of 134 other officers, was added to the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial in Washington, D.C. in May 2017, after the annual service of remembrance on the lawns of the Capitol building for officers killed in the line of duty. I was privileged to have attended as a guest of honor. The scale of the memorial service was enormous, and following the decision of President Joe Biden not to attend the previous year, the presence of Donald Trump early in his first presidential term carried enormous symbolic weight. The comfort his attendance brought to families was genuine and obvious. Later that evening, the White House was lit in blue in tribute to officers killed on duty, the first time such a gesture had taken place. By nightfall, Trump had been elevated to near sainthood within much of the law enforcement community. 24 hours before the service itself, I attend an awards ceremony where the bravery of police officers was being recognized. The stories were the stuff of movies, but at a table of colleagues from outside the U.S., we were all struck by a tale of one officer, now in a wheelchair, who put himself back on duty on Christmas Day to attend a call where a suspect was holed up in a house on his own. That tiny detail matters, for in almost any of our jurisdictions, the police would simply have starved him out. But this was the US of A, and the decision was taken to go in and get him. The result of doing so saw one officer killed and the other left in a wheelchair. The suspect did not survive. I tell both the stories of Ashley Gwindon and the wheelchair-bound hero, not to praise one and criticize the other, but to highlight just how different policing in America is to every other Western nation on earth. This is precisely why the lazy comparisons with America are so easy to dismiss whenever the subject of arming the police in the UK rears its head. The American mantra of better to be tried by 12 than carried by 6 is so ingrained in their policing culture that an outsider risks dismissing it as a trite moral underpinning for any police shooting. But as my colleagues in police unions in the States regularly pointed out, thousands of a second are all that separate you from having your own name added to the memorial, which already has more than 24,000 names on it. That is not to say that policing in America gets a free pass, or that there should be an acceptance that the nature of crime and police interactions in the States, all underpinned by the Second Amendment right to bear arms, makes shootings inevitable. But it kind of does. That inevitability, however, absolutely does not mean that all such shootings are inherently necessary or indeed justifiable. Some are cowardly, reckless, and entirely avoidable, and there are too many examples that even the staunchest supporters of law enforcement couldn't begin to defend. In a world of mobile phones and social media, you don't have to look far for the representation and misrepresentation of interactions with the police anywhere but the US in particular. These rarely tell the whole story and are often skewed to support a particular narrative, dependent on the sympathies or prejudices of the person behind the phone. But every now and then incidents occur that are captured and broadcast in full and point to police officers acting like armed psychopaths, drunk on power, as well as being poorly trained with woeful communication skills. The killing of Daniel Shaver in an Arizona hotel corridor in 2016 remains one such case. A young man sobbing on his knees and pleading not to be shot was killed by gunfire from an AR-15 style rifle carried by Officer Philip Brailsford after receiving contradictory commands. Brailsford was acquitted and subsequently retired on a lifelong disability pension linked to the shooting. His body cam footage was only released to the public after his trial. Police officers in America have one of the most dangerous jobs in the country and deserve high levels of tolerance and benefit of the doubt. But that tolerance has to have limits and be capable of withstanding scrutiny in the court of public opinion, as well as being tested legally in the criminal courts. We would be forgiven for thinking that America is on the brink of civil war, and that Donald Trump has fostered a masked, unidentifiable, and effectively unaccountable law enforcement agency under the guise of ICE. It also reveals a more sinister development in his manufactured battle with the left, a willingness to use fear and intimidation to oppress the population. Nothing good ever comes from that. The shooting dead of Renee Nicole Good has peeled back an even uglier layer of the polarization and division that is being felt in many cities across America. And rather than signify support for law enforcement, Trump's proclamations of unfettered immunity for ICE agents risks undermining wider law enforcement support and emboldening the worst aspects of an unrestrained and unaccountable secret police. This isn't just politics. It's an invitation to lawlessness under the badge. That article was by Callum Steele.
This is from the Herald on Thursday, 15th January 2026, from the News section. Money for Orkney's ferry replacement secured in budget, says Council. By Andrew Stewart. What does the Scottish budget mean for Orkney's ferry replacement programme? Orkney Islands Council say Tuesday's Scottish budget announcement has provided sure footing for its ongoing mission to replace the county's internal ferry fleet. The council said the budget gave early indications that funding for Phase 1 of Orkney's ferry replacement programme has been secured. This followed Tuesday afternoon's budget announcement in Holyrood by Cabinet Secretary for Finance, Shona Robinson. There is no specific mention of funding for Orkney Islands Council's ferry replacement programme during the announcement. However, the council said a £7.6 billion countrywide capital investment programme means they'll be able to take forward their ferry plans. The Scottish Government has said the council will have full flexibility to use funding for the ferry replacement programme. The budget has still to be agreed by Parliament. Phase 1 of the ferry replacement programme will see 3 replacement £6 million vessels built. These would serve the islands of Ede, Sandy, Stronsay and Westray, providing increased passenger, vehicle and freight capacity and significantly improved passenger facilities, with accessibility noted as a key requirement for the design. Orkney's council leader Heather Woodbridge called the budget fantastic news for the council's plans. She said, "At the moment, our team are working through a procurement process whereby we are identifying shipyards with the interest in and potential for working with us. As of next month, the council can move to working with shipyards on a contract to build ferries," she said. She added, "Today's announcement confirms that new internal ferries for Orkney are now in motion, with work already underway to make them a reality." Assuming these budget proposals are agreed by Parliament, this is a momentous day for Orkney. Meanwhile, Orkney MSP Liam MacArthur seemed more cautious about the announcement. The Liberal Democrat said, I look forward to seeing more detail on the funding that will allow Orkney Islands Council to continue taking forward the procurement of new vessels for our lifeline internal ferry fleet. The principle of this funding has now been accepted by ministers, however. That is of enormous benefit to those living and working in our ferry-linked isles. However, the Scottish Government has confirmed that Orkney's Council will be able to use funding as they see fit. A Scottish Government spokesperson said, "The budget includes an extra £11.4 million of resource and £15.5 million of capital for inter-island connectivity. Orkney will receive a share of that funding and would have full flexibility to deploy that to the internal ferry replacement programme." That article was by Andrew Stewart.
From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 15th of January, Sport. Danny Rowe predicts nail-biting Scottish Premiership finale, by Ronnie Esplin. Danny Rowe believes the William Hill Premiership title race could go to a dramatic three-team shootout in the final day of the season. No team out with the old firm has won the Scottish top flight since Aberdeen in 1985, but shock leaders Hearts are 6 points ahead of Celtic and Rangers going into the Scottish Gas Scottish Cup weekend, where the Gers host League Two side Annan Athletic on Friday night. The Ibrox boss believes it will be nip and tuck in the most exciting title race in Scotland for years after it resumes next week. Yeah, it's funny because yesterday we spoke about the pre-season. We had a meeting about the camps and the friendly games, all these things, said Rowe, who confirmed Rangers were in the process of recruiting Denmark winger Andres Skov Olsen after already signing Tochi Chukwuani and 2 Romans in the transfer window. And then finally, I said, yeah, my belief at the moment is we will have, on the last match day, maybe a race with 3 teams, and you can be top, you can be second, you can be third. It's nice for the supporters, and for us, we have to prepare, we have to work on it. I think in the last few weeks we have worked hard to have such a situation, but we know as well there's still 16 games to go, where you have to deliver again and again, and let's see what we can do. Belgian left-back Romans joined Rangers on Wednesday from Westerlo on an initial 3.5-year deal, but he will not feature against Annan as he builds up his fitness, which could take up to 14 days. The Ibrox club confirmed on Sunday that the 22-year-old Danish midfielder Chukwuani had completed his move from Sturm Graz. Asked how close he was to signing Skov Olsen, the former Sheffield Wednesday boss said, "I'm not a good poker player. Now we are in the process, it looks very positive, but as long as it's not confirmed and everything is through, I cannot tell you too much. I was asking for a left foot on the right side. I think this is also in part because we have a lot of right feet, which gives us a different profile as well. He, Skov Olsen, had a lot of goals at Club Brugge, and now it's about us. If he comes, if we bring him back to his best performance, then of course he could be a great loan signing." Rowe revealed he has not yet finished with his recruitment drive, adding, "I cannot tell you exactly the number, but we're still looking for some more positions. I think this is not a secret with the injury of Connor Barron. It changed a little bit also what we need as well as in this position. We have strong players. We have with Chukwuani a new one, but there's still a long way to go, and we have to make sure that our midfield is strong." That article was written by Ronnie Esplin. From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 15th of January 2026, Sports section. O'Neill's "Cut Me Some Slack" Celtic transfer admission, by sports writer Ryan McGinley. Martin O'Neill has responded to transfer speculation surrounding the club, asking the media to cut him some slack regarding his present situation. The interim manager steered Celtic to a narrow 1-0 win over Falkirk on Wednesday night, thanks to a first-half header from Benjamin Negrin. After the match at the Falkirk Stadium, O'Neill was quizzed on the club's ongoing transfer business, as Celtic make it 2 wins from 2 under the Irishman in his 3rd spell as boss. "We're making progress in things, and certainly by the end of the window we should have some players to supplement this squad. He said, I thought my time was done here, so I wasn't expecting to pick up the pieces again and look at players. Just give us a little bit of time, cut me a little bit of slack, and we'll be okay. The focus is to try and win some football matches, but the other aspect to it is to add a bit of extra quality to help the players out there. On his side's performance in general, O'Neill continued, we didn't play well in the game. We saw it through, and we can play much, much better. It seems strange in contrast to where we were so good on Saturday and tentative tonight. Lost the ball in areas where we shouldn't have been doing it. Overall, I think Falkirk would have found themselves really unlucky to be behind at half-time in the game. I thought we pressed a bit better in the second half, but overall, we didn't play well in the game. That report was written by Ryan McGinley and read by Ian McKenna. From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 15th of January, Sport. Rangers CEO Fraser Thornton appointed to SPFL board by sports writer Ewan Payton. Fraser Thornton, Rangers interim chief executive, has been appointed to the SPFL board. Thornton stepped into the role as acting CEO at Ibrox following the dismissal of Patrick Stewart, who was on the SPFL board before he left Rangers. Jim Gillespie will assume the role of Rangers CEO later this season when he departs St Mirren, and Thornton will then become executive director at the Scottish Premiership Giants. In the meantime, Thornton will join the SPFL board, where he will work alongside Kilmarnock's managing director, Phyllis Carroll, and Hibernian's Malcolm McPherson. Willie Houston, Ayr United, and David Cook, Dunfermline Athletic, are the Championship's representatives, while Andrew Allen, Arlo Athletic, and Ian Dugan, Stranraer, cover Leagues 1 and 2. The news comes as the SPFL board voted in favour of maintaining the SFA's cooperation loan system as a permanent fixture after proving to be a success so far in the 2025-26 season. An SPFL statement reads, Rangers CEO Fraser Thornton was appointed to the SPFL board today as clubs voted to make the Scottish FA's cooperation agreement system a permanent feature of SPFL competitions. Fraser was elected by William Hill Premiership clubs at the SPFL General Meeting and replaces Patrick Stewart, who departed the Ibrox club in late November last year. He will serve as one of the 3 William Hill Premiership representatives until the end of the season 2025-26, along with the rest of the club-appointed directors on the SPFL board. Fraser is CEO at the club and will take on the role of Executive Director at Rangers when Jim Gillespie takes on the role of Rangers Chief Executive later this season. The SPFL would like to thank Patrick Stewart for his contribution to the SPFL board. At the general meeting, the SPFL's member clubs also voted to implement the Scottish FA's cooperation agreement system permanently in SPFL competitions following a successful trial period during the current campaign. The cooperation system was introduced to provide increased flexibility for players in the transition phase of 16 to 21 to move between their parent club and a cooperation club throughout the year. Recent data has found young Scottish players have seen their playing opportunities rise almost 50% following the introduction of the cooperation system and the revamp of the SPFL's KDM Evolution Trophy to include William Hill Premiership B teams. The total number of playing minutes for Scottish under-21 players, born in the calendar year 2005 or younger, has risen by 71,395, with increases across the William Hill Championship, League 1 and League 2, Highland League, Lowland League, Premier Sports Cup and the KD Evolution Trophy. The Scottish FA recently carried out a survey with SPFL clubs, which demonstrated widespread support for continuing the cooperation system, and clubs voted to retain the system on a permanent basis this morning. That article was written by Ewan Payton.
These letters are also from the Herald on Thursday the 15th of January 2025 and again are found in the opinion section. The first letter, Police plus guns don't work. The fatal police shooting in Minneapolis was shocking, but from a Scottish viewpoint it is impossible not to see it as part of a wider pattern. Rennie Nicole Good was no terrorist, and Trump's sick government is lying about it. The Herald, January 11. When policing is built around the routine carrying of firearms and a presumption of threat, escalation becomes the default and mistakes become irreversible. There is another way. In Glasgow's Kenmure Street incident in 2021, a tense immigration standoff ended without a single injury because officers arrived unarmed, de-escalated the situation, and treated the public as people rather than dangers. Time and restraint saved lives. No model is perfect, but the contrast is real. When the state's first instinct is to protect life, tragedies become rarer. When the instinct is to justify force, they become predictable. The response to the Minneapolis shooting should begin with compassion, not indifference, and with a willingness to imagine a different kind of policing. Judith Campbell, Portree. And finally, Iranians don't need US interference. At last, an article by Kevin McKenna with which I almost entirely agree. Drums of war are not about rescuing the downtrodden of Iran. This is the new Klondike, January 13. As Mr. McKenna points out, it was the US and UK who inflicted the tyrannical, profligate Shah on the Iranian people when they staged a coup to overthrow the democratically elected Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh in 1953. All because he had the audacity to demand that the Iranian people, not foreign companies, should benefit from its oil wealth. The Shah bankrupted his country, and it was in desperation that groups from all parts of the political spectrum joined together to overthrow him, and invited Ayatollah Khomeini back from exile in Paris, out of the frying pan and into the fire. I used to visit Iran for work, and my wife and I holidayed there in 2016. It's a fantastic country with an astonishing history, a rich culture, and lovely people. What a tragedy its last 70 years have been. However, it's glaringly obvious that the last thing the Iranian people need now is American interference. The US has a shocking history of adventurism overseas. They helped overthrow President Allende of Chile in 1973, replacing him with the brutal General Pinochet. They carpet-bombed parts of Laos and Cambodia in their determination to keep their puppet dictator in power in South Vietnam. And they made a complete mess of their rule in Iraq after they deposed the murderous Saddam Hussein. I supported the British involvement in that last debacle, as I thought the UK, with its long history of colonial administration, would be able to keep an interim US administration on the right path. How wrong I was. I underestimated the sheer stupidity of American administrators abroad. Mr. McKenna is right. US foreign policy is now centred around making money for those who already have more of it than they could ever need. It's also about power, showing off American might by beating up those who are weaker. And it's about their president's enormous ego, which may well seize him Greenland and rename it Trumpland. Inconceivable a mere year ago, a distinct possibility now. Doug Maughan, Dunblane. This article is from the Herald on Thursday the 15th of January 2025. It is found in the Voices section and the headline is Why Timothy Chalamet is Wrong Over Gen Z Unk Trend, and the report is by Neil Mackay. There's a new fashion among young folk. It's calling the older generation Unk, short for uncle. Neil Mackay, who has fought ageing with all his might, rages at the trend. I've always been weird about my age. Even as a kid, I hated birthdays. I liked the parties and the presents and the attention, as despite all my best efforts, I cannot fully suppress my raving inner narcissist and rapacious greed. but you can stick the idea of celebrating the annual march 1 year closer to the grave. Why do we mark the sweep of the Grim Reaper's scythe like grinning chimps? Surely it would be better to wear mourning black, or acknowledge our birthday in silent and stoic fashion for what it really is, cheating death for another year day. To my rank and shoddy shame, there was a period throughout my 40s when I lied liberally about my age. It started when I remained 39 for 3 years, refusing to enter my 40s. Then I stayed 40 for a few years, when maintaining the I'm 39 lie became impossible, given most folk have a basic grasp of mathematics and biology. I stuck doggedly to 45 for 5 years. Then, when I hit 50, I cried for a week, swallowed the truth like strychnine, quit the vain fibbing, and accepted that youth and beauty were now dead. For a while, I felt like Boris Karloff in The Mummy, some withered and ancient freak designed to frighten children, and best kept wrapped in bandages. I checked the mirror daily with a magnifying glass, searching for death's love letter, the wrinkle. I told myself I'd retreat from society to a monastery if ever a liver spot appeared. What even are they? I was jealous of Dorian Gray and his portrait in the attic. If the devil was real, I'd have made a pact. Today, I'm no longer quite as demented about ageing. I've calmed somewhat and found a grudging acceptance of looming oblivion, though sometimes, particularly when I've been struggling to get my once svelte and now absurdly beefy buttocks into a pair of jeans, I'll find an old picture from my 20s or 30s and drift into the garden like a melancholic ghost. My children will have to bring me back inside, wrapped in silver blankets, for hot tea and medication, weeping over the loss of the sweet bird of youth. At least I've never considered plastic surgery. Not only do I fear knives, but looking old is preferable to owning a face like a boiled sausage. Astonishingly, I've retained the brazen cheek to mock those who get facelifts and Botox. At least they're honest. I lied for a quarter of my life about how old I was. Despite discovering some degree of equanimity about the ageing process, I remain very thin-skinned, perhaps another reason to avoid the surgeon's knife, about the years passing. I'm happy to be on the pointy end of some teasing from friends and family about pretty much anything except my age. Slag me about my age and I'll go away and plot your complete and utter destruction, even if you're a blood relative. So, I'm understandably a little on the defensive when it comes to this new trend among kids, who I want to hate because they're young, though mostly I can't help quite liking them, for calling folk they deem to be old unk, as in uncle. When I first heard this, I started looking around for chainsaws. If any kid dared unk me, then I would leatherface them. That was the plan. I'd sellotape them into a wheelie bin. According to Generation Alpha, that's the lot born in the 2010s, a statement which itself feels unbelievable as I still think the 90s were just a few years ago, and unk is basically anyone over 30. Yes, 30. What the hell does that make me? Double unk? Unky unk? Grandpappy unk? Idiot American celebrities are egging it on. Sabrina Carpenter, who's 26, called her producer unk. I'd have sampled a fart noise into our next record if I was him. And Timothy Chalamet referred to himself as an unk on his 30th birthday. I've had an irrational hatred of Timothy Chalamet, or Shallow Timothy, as we'll call him from now on, since Dune, the worst movie ever made. His latest offence merely confirms I was right. Apparently, signs of unk energy, and the term unk is gender neutral, so you don't get to be aunties, ladies, include knowing the lyrics to songs by the Black Eyed Peas. My only response on reading this was to silently mouth the words, "Oh, F off." I hate the Black Eyed Peas. I mean, they wrote a song called My Humps, so on those grounds alone I should qualify for an UNC exemption. I'm prepared to tolerate much from the younger generation due to my fondness for them, even their wide-eyed wonderment when they discover historic events such as the Vietnam War. But I will not tolerate being anyone's UNC. Frankly, it sounds pervy, only one step down the screepy scale from Daddy. What really gets me, though, is that young folk often act older than my generation. I have lost count of the parties I've been at, where it's Gen X and baby boomers up dancing, drunk as monkeys till dawn, while Gen Z and the millennials are all tuckered out and sipping on the Evian in case they get a hangover. Now, I'm not advocating absolutely fiending at party-wise like feral folk of my vintage. I salute the wiser choices of the younger generation. But still, don't be calling me UNC if you can't pogo at 3 a.m. after 4 bottles of bubbles. That makes you the UNC mate, not me. In a way, though, the softer, kinder, gentler side of me, who I let out intermittently, gets the UNC vibe. It can actually be seen as quite sweet. It's much nicer than the old OK boomer, which my generation and the millennials threw at our parents and grandparents after Trump and Brexit. The OK boomer line pushed generations apart. Calling someone UNC is, I suppose I must admit, a clumsy attempt at telling a generation you're fond of them. If it wasn't for the fact that I'm vain, temperamental, and terrified of my own mortality, I guess I'd quite like it. That report was by Neil Mackay.
The Herald on the 16th of January in the news section. Former Aberdeen Airport baggage handler named Operations Director by Jody Harrison. A man who started his career as a baggage handler at a Scottish airport has risen through the ranks to land a top role. Robert Patterson has been appointed Operations Director of Aberdeen International Airport almost 30 years after he started with a job logging suitcases across the runway. Reporting directly to AGS's Chief Operating Officer, Ronald Leach, Mr. Patterson has assumed his new role, bringing extensive operational experience gained across the aviation sector, the company said in the statement. AGS said its new director had been a key member of the Aberdeen team for several years, most recently serving as head of operations, where he played a pivotal role in enhancing the passenger experience. Having started with Aberdeen International Airport in 1998 as a baggage handler, he has also had several roles within the airport, including head of airside operations. Ronald Leach, Chief Operating Officer at AGS, said Robert has consistently demonstrated strong leadership and deep understanding of the operational challenges and opportunities at Aberdeen. His appointment comes at an exciting time as we continue to invest in infrastructure and sustainability initiatives that will shape the future of the airport. Mr. Patterson said, I started with Aberdeen International Airport as a baggage handler in 1998, and I'm delighted to take on the role of Operations Director. This is a fantastic opportunity to lead a dedicated team as we focus on delivering a safe, efficient and world-class experience for our passengers and airline partners. In January 2025, AGS was acquired by Avialliance, one of the world's leading private airport operators, who announced plans to invest £350 million over the next 5 years to support growth and decarbonisation across AGS's airports. This investment will include upgrades to airfield infrastructure and emergency efficiency projects at Aberdeen, ensuring the airport is equipped to meet future demand. And that was by Jody Harrison. The Herald on 16th of January and the news section. Tad Hickley on Palestine protests, free speech and Scotland by Gabriel Mackay. Irish activist and comedian Tagging Hickley says Britain is teetering on the edge of being a police state with crackdowns on protest. The filmmaker, who was detained on the Global Summit flotilla last year, is a prominent advocate for Palestine, who once described his raison d'etre as trying to break up the United Kingdom through the unusual medium of comedy. Mr. Hickley will speak at two events organised by Friends of Al-Aqsa and the Scottish Palestine Solidarity Campaign this weekend in Glasgow on Friday night and on Saturday in Edinburgh. He tells the Herald it's a Q&A with hopefully some of my experiences and sharing some ideas of how we strategise the movement, not just for Palestine, but I think as an anti-imperialist, anti-billionaire people's movement. It feels like we're at the point where we need to re-strategise, not just endlessly marching without specific goal. We've come this far with it, and it's been beautiful, but unfortunately we were not really moving the dial that much. How do we connect more? How do we support each other? How do we show a bit more backbone and maybe a bit more teeth as well? We're in a fight not just for Palestine, but for our own humanity and our own planet as well. One common response to marches, demonstrations and direct action is to accuse those taking part of failing to focus on the issues at home, with social media responses flooded by rejoinders, such as get a job or send them to Gaza then. The Herald asks Mr. Hickley how he believes that attitude can be overcome. He says, I think the main thing you have to do is work through the propaganda. I fall into it as much as everyone else. We're targeted with propaganda, which basically tells us not to go in SHIT about anybody other than yourself. People over there are suffering, but it's complicated, so don't meddle in it. Also, don't meddle with the billionaires. Don't meddle with the system. We're disincentivized to organize ourselves and fight back all the time. The focus is always on kind of struggling through because things are getting more expensive all the time and we're constantly being told we need to look after ourselves. One big thing I'm definitely learning recently is that free speech is so important and it's been taken away from people all the time. If we can fight for the right to free speech, as so many people on the right claim to, we can win all the arguments. Be it Israel and Palestine, or be it that one human being shouldn't have $1 trillion while half of Scotland and Ireland are living just over or below the poverty line. It's about convincing people that we're all in the same situation, struggling to make ends meet, while there's a tiny cluster of billionaires, and a free speech is a key. You can use the historical comparison of the comparison of the abolitionists trying to end slavery. The powers that be were trying to shut down all free speech on that side. They have to alter the meaning of well-worn phrases. You can go back and look at the research. Before October 7, nobody would have ever globalize the Intifada as a reference to slaughtering Jews. It's a complete fantasy made up in order to neutralize the phase. Basically, what they're doing is shutting down conversation. I could even argue that the Palestinian resistance is another example of that. How on earth could you ever reach a peaceful agreement if one of the sides is unmentionable? If you look at the conflict in my own country, there was only a resolution to that conflict when all sides were heard and no longer censored, and you could actually sit down and have a conversation. In Britain, if I mention the word Hamas, there's almost a gasp in the air like we're all going to get arrested here. And I understand it. I think Britain is teetering on the brink of being a police state at this point. We can't even mention the actors on both sides. I have no idea how you could possibly reach a resolution that way. And you certainly won't with this non-peace plan that Trump is trying to force through at the moment, which still doesn't really take Palestinian perspectives into account at all. Hamas, prior to October 7, was openly seen by members of the Israeli government as a useful propaganda tool compared to the more secular Palestine Liberation Organization, which, as the Palestinian Authority controlled largely by Yasser Arafat's former Fatah, runs the West Bank. Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich said in the 2015 interview, the Palestine Authority is a burden and Hamas is an asset. It's a terrorist organization. No one will recognize it. No one will give it status. No one will let it put forth a resolution at the UN Security Council. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been accused inside Israel of propping up Hamas in order to weaken the Palestinian Authority prior to the October 7 attacks. For Mr. Hickley, the focus on the fundamentalist religious nature of Hamas is a distraction. He says that there is this imperialist perspective on the Western side, kind of infantilizing Palestinian people and telling them exactly how they should run their own state. I've seen it in the movement too, whether it's a Palestinian solidarity group in Cork or Jamaica. It's not for that group to decide how Palestine wants to run itself. If they want to have a deeply fundamentalist religious state, I don't really see what business that is of ours. We are advocating for their right to self-determination, not our determination of what they should do. For the Irishman, that message of straightforward anti-imperialism is a key to his message. Mr. Higley said, that's what we're going to be talking about in Glasgow and Edinburgh, how to strategize and unify people with a very straightforward message. I'm hoping to do a podcast with a mate of mine, which will hopefully be quite funny. But the basic message is that there is this cohort of billionaires who are trying to destroy the planet, and I'm quite happy for men, women and children to be slaughtered at will. We can kind of get into some of the issues on the left, some of the purity testing. We can deal with that after we all unite and take the billionaires away from the levers of control of the world. My mate has a nice analogy. It's like there are zombies in the house, and instead of arguing with the guy next to you about Trotsky, just pick up a stake and stab the zombie in its heart. We can deal with Trotsky afterwards. Tag Hickley will appear at the Art Glasgow on Friday, January 16, and Augustine United Church, Edinburgh, the following day. Tickets for the events are free, but a £3 donation is advised. And that was by Gabriel Mackay. The Herald on the 16th of January and the news section. Teachers to vote again on strikes over excessive workload by James McKeaney. Scotland's largest teaching union is to reballot members after a vote on industrial action failed to achieve the necessary turnout levels. Members of the EIS have been asked if they would be willing to engage in action, including strikes, in response to the Scottish Government's failure to deliver promised reductions in teacher workload. The SNP has pledged to reduce teachers' class contact time by 90 minutes per week, but failed to increase teacher numbers to a sufficient level to deliver on this manifesto commitment. Teaching unions have also hit out at councils over attempts to exert control over how the newly available preparation time would be spent. An overwhelming majority of teachers taking part in the ballot-backed industrial action, with 86% supporting strikes that would almost certainly lead to widespread school closures. A total of 93% of respondents supported actions short of strike, such as a work to rule. However, the overall turnout of 47% falls short of legal requirements, which demand that at least half of ineligible voters take part for a ballot to be valid. These rules were introduced by the previous Conservative government in 2016, and although they are due to be repealed by the current Labour government, remain in place at this time. In response to the result, the union's executive committee have now confirmed that members will be reballoted in the hope that a fresh vote achieves the required turnout to allow industrial action to commence. EIS General Secretary Andrea Bradley said it's disappointing that despite very strong yes votes for industrial action, our ballot has fallen victim to a highly restrictive element of trade union legislation that is soon to be repealed. The ballot thresholds in that Tory-era piece of legislation are some of the most restrictive in the world and were designed to create a barrier to legitimate industrial action. While the current UK government has passed a new Employment Rights Act, which will remove many of the more restrictive elements of trade union law, the excessively strict thresholds that are a lingering legacy of the previous UK government currently remain in place. The sooner the current government moves ahead with formalising their removal, the better. All workers across the country will welcome that change. A special meeting of EIS executive was held yesterday evening to receive the ballot result and to consider the next steps in the campaign to reduce excessive teacher workload. There was a very strong message from that meeting that the EIS must continue to press ahead with its campaign to secure promised actions to tackle excessive workload. The Scottish Government and COSLA made promises to Scotland's teachers and pupils that action would be taken to employ additional teachers, reduce teachers' class contact time, cut teacher workload, and create a better working environment for teachers and pupils alike. We cannot let the politicians off the hook on their promises, and we cannot take our collective foot off the gas in our workload campaign. The message to Scotland's teachers today is clear. We know that your workload remains excessive, and we must continue to stand together and work collectively to ensure that it is reduced. The pressure created by the threat of industrial action focuses the minds of politicians and presses them to take action to deliver on their promises. In the Scottish budget earlier this week, the Finance Secretary made specific reference to additional money going to local authorities to enable the class contact time promise to be met. It is no coincidence that this announcement came in the midst of a ballot for industrial action by teachers. We must keep the pressure on, and we must ask our members to vote again on industrial action, and in even greater numbers, to ensure that we can hold the politicians to account and continue to demand that at last they deliver on their own promises to the Scottish education, its pupils and its teachers. The Scottish Government and COSLA have been approached for comment. And that was by James McKeaney.
From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 19th of January 2026, from the news section. Angus Council apologises for swearing at man on Facebook. Report by Josh Pizzuto-Pomako. A Scottish local authority has apologised after an employee swore in an online comment aimed at a member of the public. Angus Council took to Facebook on Friday to inform road users that overnight works in Kirriemuir and Forfar would be suspended due to freezing temperatures. According to the Courier, a man jokingly replied to the post with the words, "All stop!" This prompted the local authority's official account to respond, noting that the works were essential and backed by local businesses. However, the comment went on to say, if the pavements and road were left in the state they're in, there was a real risk of an accident if someone tripped onto the road. F*****U. In a statement following the incident, a council spokesperson said, "We apologise for inappropriate language that was contained within a response in our Facebook account on Friday. It did not meet our usual standards, and appropriate steps have been taken to address this." According to the paper, the person who received the response took it in stride, commenting, "I thought it was hilarious. Keep up the good work." Report by Josh Pizzuto-Pomako. From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 19th of January 2026, from the news section. Glasgow researchers discover new treatments for liver and bowel cancer, by Sarah Ward. Researchers have discovered new treatments to suppress the growth of cancers of the bowel and liver. Researchers at the Cancer Research UK Scotland Institute in Glasgow studied genes which can cause cancer, looking specifically at the bowel and liver, to discover why those genes only cause cancers in specific tissues. The research team, part of the Cancer Grand Challenges Initiative founded by Cancer Research UK and the National Cancer Institute, focused on genetic faults that allow cancer to hijack a signalling system in the body which tells cells when and when not to grow. Cancer can then use that system, called the WNT pathway, to grow tumours in the intestine and liver. A new paper published in Nature Genetics has disclosed that a protein called nucleophosmin, NPM1, which is involved in the control of growth, was found to be in high levels in bowel cancer and some liver cancers because of the genetic errors in the WNT pathway. By blocking this protein, researchers found that it may be possible to develop new treatments for specific cancers which hijack the body's growth system through this genetic error. Lead researcher on the project, Professor Owen Sanson, Director of the Cancer Research UK Scotland Institute and the University of Glasgow, said, "Because NPM1 isn't essential for normal adult tissue health, blocking it could be a safe way to treat certain cancers, like some hard-to-treat bowel and liver cancers. We found that if NPM1 is removed, cancer cells struggle to make proteins properly and this allows a tumour suppressor to activate, preventing cancer growth. Increasing numbers of people are affected by these cancers, with some treatments unfortunately limited for some patients, so finding a new way to tackle these cancers is crucial. Part of the Specific Cancer project, which focuses on why some cancer-causing genes only cause cancers in specific tissues, the research identified a way to target some of the genetic errors that cause hard-to-treat cancer in those organs. Scotland has one of the highest rates of bowel cancer and liver cancer in the UK. There are about 4,200 people in the UK diagnosed with bowel cancer per year, and it remains the second most common cause of cancer death in Scotland, claiming about 1,700 lives annually. A recent study by the American Cancer Society published in The Lancet Oncology showed early onset bowel cancer rates in adults aged 25 to 49 are rising in 27 of 50 countries studied, and are rising faster in young women in Scotland and England than in young men. About 670 people die from liver cancer each year in Scotland. Proteins are essential for the body to build structures such as skin, hair or other tissue, but sometimes the body's messaging system goes wrong, causing tumours to grow. This can be caused by mutations in the body's messaging system, which pass on the wrong instructions from DNA, causing the cells to grow uncontrollably. Specific Cancer was co-funded by Cancer Research UK and the Mark Foundation for Cancer Research in 2019 to understand why some cancer-causing genes only cause cancers in specific tissues, seeking patterns to find new treatments more personalised to a patient or particular area of the body. Bowel and liver cancers were the focus of the latest research, but the team hope its findings could be applicable to other cancers. Researchers will then seek medical treatments which block the production of the NPM1 protein. Existing treatments can slow tumour growth, so if a new drug can be discovered to target NPM1 in the same way, it could provide a safe and effective way to treat certain cancers. Dr. David Scott, Director of Cancer Grand Challenges, said, "Scientific breakthroughs like this demonstrate the power of Cancer Grand Challenges to bring together the world's best minds to transform our understanding of how cancer starts and, crucially, how we treat it. By scrutinising the fundamental processes that drive cancer, we can tackle the disease at its beginnings, driving progress towards real-world impact for people affected by cancer." That article was written by Sarah Ward and read by Ian McKenna. From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 19th of January 2026, from the news section. QEUH, Sarwar calls for criminal investigation into Sturgeon, by political editor Andrew Learmonth. Anna Sarwar has called for a criminal investigation into Nicola Sturgeon and the managers at the NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde after the board's 11th hour admission that contaminated water at the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital probably caused serious infections among vulnerable patients, including children with cancer. The Health Board's U-turn, revealed in closing submissions to the Scottish Hospitals Inquiry, comes after years of denying any link between the hospital's water system and a cluster of infections that contributed to multiple deaths and left dozens of patients seriously ill. The statutory inquiry, which will hear final oral submissions this week, was launched after 2 children died and at least 84 patients fell ill with unusual infections following the opening of the £1 billion flagship hospital in Glasgow. It is examining the planning, design and construction of a QEUH campus, which also includes the Royal Hospital for Children. In closing submissions to the inquiry published ahead of final oral hearings, NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde said it accepts it is more likely than not that the material proportion of the additional environmentally relevant bloodstream infections, BSI, in the paediatric hemato-oncology population between 2016 and 2018 had a connection to the state of the hospital water system. It added, NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde accepts that, on the balance of probabilities, there is a causal connection between some infections suffered by patients and the hospital environment, in particular the water system. NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde departs from its earlier submissions in this regard, having heard all expert evidence. Ms Sturgeon was Health Secretary when the hospital was commissioned, and had become the First Minister by the time it opened. A key report on the state of water at the hospital, completed 1 week before it was due to open, suggested that infections could be caused by the water system on the campus, but the decision was made to open regardless. Mr Sarwar said, "Many ministers within the government, excluding former Health Secretary Jean Freeman," he stressed, but including Ms Sturgeon, lied about the issue. I think this is the biggest scandal in the history of the Scottish Parliament. I think it is criminal, and I think not just the former chief executives, former chairs and key managers of the health board and the hospital at the time, but I also think senior ministers at the time need to be investigated so we can get to the truth about why this cover-up happened, who was part of the cover-up, and they should face the full consequences of that cover-up in a criminal investigation. We've got to make it really clear that we're not going to accept this, and it can never ever happen again in public life, or indeed in the private sector, to be honest, in Scotland, ever again. Speaking to the Press Association, Mr Sarwar said he was not willing to believe that the water report was not seen by someone in a senior position before the opening of the hospital. There must have been someone senior enough that saw that and made decisions to plough on ahead with devastating consequences, he said. Scottish Conservative Shadow Health Secretary Dr Sandesh Gulhane called for Neil Gray to come to Parliament and update MSPs. He said the board's admission amounted to a cynical and shameful reversal. The public deserve clarity and accountability on this huge and growing scandal. SNP ministers are ultimately accountable for what went on at the Queen Elizabeth, and that's why it's imperative that Neil Gray makes an urgent statement and faces questions in Parliament tomorrow. After years of cover-up, denial and undermining of whistleblowers, the 11th hour admission by NHS bosses of a link between the contaminated water and infections, just as the inquiry is concluding, is cynical and shameful. This scandal resulted in lives being lost. Grieving families deserve answers, so the Health Secretary must come clear on what ministers knew and when. What we do know is that the actions of the health bosses have come straight from the SNP playbook. Secrecy, cover-up and evading accountability. Full transparency from all involved is essential. That's why the Scottish Conservatives are demanding an urgent statement from Neil Gray. The admission has also prompted renewed anger from families whose children were infected, including the father of Molly Cudahy, a teenager who developed septic shock while receiving cancer treatment at the QEUH and died last August, aged 23. Molly, from Gourock in Inverclyde, was 15 when she was diagnosed with metastatic Ewing sarcoma. In 2018, she became seriously ill after contracting an infection potentially acquired at the hospital. The same year, concerns about the water system were first raised. Her father, John Cudahy, said the board had been warned for years about the link. Molly's words and experience must continue to echo beyond her lifetime, he told BBC Scotland News. The sad thing is, Molly is in her grave and she never got to read the words or hear what they had to say. A former Police Scotland head of organised crime and counter-terrorism, Mr Cudahy said all his daughter ever wanted was official acknowledgement that there was a problem with the hospital's water supply. The trauma just continued long after the cancer had gone. Because the impact of the antibiotics, which would be administered to the leprosy patients, were so strong, were given over a prolonged period of time, they had a material impact on the reduced kidney function, on her liver function, on her overall body and living experience. Her quality of life was reduced, and it had a devastating impact on her. I am in no doubt that Molly's quality of life was further eroded as a result of the bacteria. Absolutely no doubt. The inquiry was launched after the deaths of several patients, including 10-year-old Millie Main, who died in 2017 after contracting the Stenotrophomonas bacteria, while being treated for leukemia at the Royal Hospital for Children, which adjoins the QEUH. Millie's mother, Kimberly Darroch, welcomed the board's admission, but said it should have come much earlier. As a mother, I spent 6 years fighting for answers that should have been given at the very beginning. It is good news that the health board has admitted that, on the balance of probabilities, there was a causal connection between the environment and Millie's bloodstream infection. This acknowledgement is a significant milestone for our family, but it also highlights how hard families have had to fight just to have the truth recognised. A separate corporate homicide investigation into the deaths of Millie, 2 other children and 73-year-old Gail Armstrong was launched in 2021. NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde has been named as a suspect. NHS GGC, the Scottish Government and Ms Sturgeon have all been contacted for comment. That article was written by Andrew Learmonth and read by Ian McKenna. From the Herald Scotland, Sunday the 18th of January 2026, from the news section. SNP MSP drops assisted dying support over coercion concerns. Report by Josh Pizzuzzo-Pamako. An MSP has withdrawn her support for assisted dying legislation over concerns it could lead to vulnerable Scots being coerced into ending their lives. SNP parliamentarian Audrey Nicholl, convener of Holyrood's Criminal Justice Committee, had backed Liam MacArthur's members' bill at its first stage last May, but has now told colleagues she will not vote for it to become law. The Times reports that Nicholl sent a letter to fellow MSPs explaining her rationale for the U-turn. Of greatest concern to me are the provisions around coercion, Nicholl, a policing veteran of 31 years, said. The reality is that some individuals will be subject to coercion and pressure, whether directly or indirectly, and in ways which may be subtle and difficult to enunciate. My perspective on this has, to a great extent, been shaped by my policing career and my exposure in public service to those most vulnerable in our communities. I believe, even with the most robust legislative provision in place, the reality is individuals will experience coercion and pressure from others. The bill passed 70 to 56 at stage 1 in May. The current set of proposals, which passed 70-56 at stage 1 in May, would permit mentally competent adults with a terminal physical to apply for an assisted death. 2 doctors would be required to sign off on the decision before the NHS could issue the necessary drugs. The Times also revealed that Conservative MSP Brian Whittle, who backed the bill at stage 1, would not vote for it to become law. The way the bill stands, I could not lend my support to it, Whittle said. I await to see what amendments come forward at stage 3. Similarly, the paper reported that Labour's Paul Sweeney is likely to withdraw his support for the bill if his concerns about applicants' proximity to death are not addressed. Another supporter of the bill, Independent MSP Colin Smith, had his Holyrood pass withdrawn after being charged with voyeurism and possessing indecent images of children. Coupled with Nicholl's defection, this means the bill would be defeated if 6 MSPs changed their votes to no. That report was written by Josh Pizzuzzo-Pamako and read by Ian McKenna.
From Herald Scotland, 12th of January 2026, from the STEM section of the business section. Network of Scottish X-accounts go dark amid Iran blackout. Article by Josh Pizzuzzo-Pamako. A network of fake Scottish X accounts linked to Iran has gone dark after an internet blackout was imposed in the West Asian nation. The silence from the group of accounts, which began on Thursday, comes amid widespread protests against the leadership of the Islamic Republic. Industry publication UK Defence Journal, which has tracked the accounts for months, said that multiple X accounts claiming to be supporters of Scottish independence have ceased activity. One such account, known as Fiona, has not posted since Thursday. The account, which describes itself as a proud Scottish lass and passionate about Scotland's independence and our right to self-determination, is based in Europe, according to X's location data. However, This is likely due to the use of a VPN, which obscures the country or region the account is located in. Other accounts, known as Jake and Lucy, have also been quiet since the blackout began. The accounts, which have thousands of followers, increasingly shared extreme content in the days prior to going dark. Jake claimed that a top BBC anchor resigned on air and was immediately detained by security services, and that crowds have surrounded the residence of the newly appointed Governor-General imposed by London. Meanwhile, Fiona said that protesters have seized Balmoral Estate and international markets are dumping UK assets as images of tanks in Edinburgh go viral. Lucy claimed that farmers have used tractors to block the A1 at the English border, while another account called Kelly said that army trucks are rolling down the Royal Mile, soldiers in fatigues are guarding the Scottish Parliament. Previously, a group of pseudonymous accounts expressing support for Scottish independence went dark immediately after the internet in Iran collapsed amid Israeli and US strikes in June 2025. At the time, disinformation analysis firm Ciabra claimed that as much as 26% of profiles discussing Scottish independence were fake. Similarly, a 2024 study by researchers at Clemson University has estimated that 4% of content relating to independence were linked to one Iranian-backed bot network of around 80 accounts. According to the study, the accounts in this network all have false persona which purport to be citizens of the United Kingdom. They post messages which support left-leaning political views and attack conservative politicians, champion Scottish independence and back the Scottish National Party and denounce Israel and its behaviour in the ongoing war in Gaza. And that article was written by Josh Pizzuto-Pomacco.
This is from the Herald Scotland of Tuesday the 20th of January 2026 from the opinion section. No more than £500. Time to get tough on political donations. This article is by Neil Mackay. Rich donors have corroded our democracy by turning it into their plaything and undermining the interests of the people. It is time for that to end, argues our writer-at-large. The principal reason for the rotten, deadly mess we find ourselves in today is this. Over the decades, multimillionaires and latterly billionaires have bought up political parties with their donations and turned government into a corporate plaything which works against the interests of the people. That's why some tycoons pay less in tax than their cleaners. In a fair society, capital gains tax would be balanced with income tax, so rich and poor shouldered proportionate burdens. That's just one instance of how the rich pay politicians to stack the odds in their favour. Across the West, trust in politics has collapsed. The people know it's a con. Sure, we can vote, but the parties we vote for are owned not by us, but by their donors. Democracy became a bidding war. Whoever writes the checks calls the shots on government. That's why so many voters have turned to the extremes. What other hope is there? In Britain, in both the national and devolved parliaments, all parties stink of venality. They sell their conscience to the highest bidder, while spinning lies to the electorate. Political donations have slithered back into the spotlight in Scotland. The Easdale brothers, who are billionaires apparently, are dropping a 6-figure donation on Scottish Labour and its leader Anas Sarwar, as revealed by the Herald. Sarwar is the kind of company he understands. the privately educated son of a millionaire and Britain's first Muslim MP, Mohammed Sarwar, has enjoyed a gilded life. Labour is compromised from the get-go with this donation. Among their many interests, the Easdales own McGill's, Britain's largest independent bus group. The brothers reportedly want to rid Scotland of an SNP government that has harmed the Scottish economy. It should be noted that bus travel was made free for under 22s in Scotland from 2022. The Transport Scotland Act gives councils powers to run their own bus services and franchise private services. The Easdales oppose plans to franchise Glasgow buses. That would see buses remain in private hands, but the routes and fares would be set by the public body, Strathclyde Passenger Transport. Sandy Easdale said the brothers had hired heavyweight lawyers to fight the plans. Here is a clear case of a private versus public clash of interests, and Scottish Labour is to have its pockets filled by one side, the Easdales. He who pays the piper calls the tune, right? How can Sarwar be trusted on transport now? His motives are shot to pieces. This isn't a partisan matter. The SNP are past masters at grovelling to the rich, and the Tories made it an art form. The SNP lapped up money from Brian Souter, another Scottish tycoon, who showed that wealth can create the right to political interference. The only people who can possibly support this state of affairs are the rich, the top 1%, who can shower gold on political parties to do their bidding. And company shareholders, of course, who see their dividends rise when political parties are well greased by corporate donations. Under current rules, only donations over £11,800 must be reported. If you paid thousands to some grubby politician willing to sell their soul to the highest bidder, would you not expect a bang for your buck? I'd expect them to dance naked for me if I commanded it. There is only one way around this corrosive abuse: ban political donations. The current rules say that a sum of money is only considered a donation if it is bigger than £500. Fine, then set the limit at that. Make it the law that nobody, whether rich, poor or a corporation, can donate anything in excess of £500 to a political party or a politician. You want democracy? There's your democracy. For many folk out there, £500 is a lot of money. But no party is going to rewrite their manifesto for such a small sum. To ban all donations above £500 keeps the door open enough so that ordinary people, if they wish, can support political causes. But it shuts the door for good on the rich buying our political system and government. There will come a time in the future when our children or grandchildren look back on this era and survey with blistering clarity the many mistakes we've made but were too blind to see. They will wonder why the people accepted the rich running roughshod over them while thanking billionaires, indeed paying them for the pleasure. How, they will wonder, were we content to be serfs for so long? Why did we ever accept this state of affairs? The answer will be twofold. First, we allowed the rich to buy our politicians with donations. We accepted that whoever paid the highest price purchased our government. And then second, we allowed the super-rich to buy up our media, both traditional media and social media, so that the very means by which we communicate with each other was controlled and manipulated by those with interests inimical to our own. Checkmate against the people. From these two sins of collective stupidity, all other miseries flowed. The inequities in tax, the looting of national assets, the destruction of our land and the polluting of our water, the division that's been fostered amongst the people, the diversionary scapegoating, the wars and poverty, the failures too many to count. If government operates for the 1%, it fails for the 99%. That's what has happened. If we ban political donations, except for small sums below £500, then we recalibrate politics overnight. Politicians would no longer look to the rich and powerful for answers, but to us. Clearly, changing the law on donations means that some money must come from the public purse to allow parties to operate at elections. Without funding, we cannot hear their messaging, evidently. Any funding should be minimal. Small allowances proportionate to membership, maybe. It's a price worth paying. Indeed, the change would pay for itself within one election cycle, as money siphoned off by rich donors returned to the people. Some penury would also teach politicians humility, reminding them who they work for, and perhaps still their heated mouths from spouting lies and fomenting hate, which under the current conditions seems to be all most of them are good for. That article was by Neil Mackay.
That concludes this week's edition of the Herald Scotland podcast. Please remember to subscribe to our channels at Tune Review and to tell your friends about our service.